The call came at 9 in the morning, the day of my son's big gala. A young woman's voice, crisp and careful. "Am I speaking with Mr. Grady Boone? Sergeant Boone?" I said she was. She paused. "Sir, General Hollis would like you seated at the head table tonight. He asked me to arrange it personally. And sir, he asked me not to mention it to your son." I stood in my kitchen and held the phone a long time after she hung up. My son had spent 3 weeks telling me to keep quiet tonight, to smile and blend in and not embarrass him. He had no idea a 4-star general was about to walk into his party looking for me.
Welcome back to The Forgotten Father. Grab your coffee, get comfortable.
And remember, the people in these stories had every chance to do right by the ones who raised them. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. You're going to want to stay till the end. My name is Grady Boone. I am 78 years old. I live in Beckley, West Virginia, on a quiet street named Maple. I drive a 1998 Ford pickup with a dent in the tailgate. I wear a Timex watch with a cracked face. I grow tomatoes along the back fence every summer. I am a plain man. If you saw me at the hardware store, you'd hold the door and think nothing of me. That is exactly how I like it. Most people in my town know me as the quiet old man with the good tomatoes. That's all they need to know. I raised one son. His name is Preston. Preston did well for himself. He runs a company now. Solar panels, contracts, big numbers. He wears suits that cost more than my truck. He is proud of what he built. I am proud of him too. Or I was. Before I understood how he really saw me. Preston called me 2 weeks before the gala. His voice had that tone, the polite one he uses when he wants something. "Dad, the company's throwing a charity event. Big one. The mayor's coming. Investors." I said that sounded wonderful. He cleared his throat. "I want you there. But Dad, it's a certain kind of crowd. Important people. Just, keep it simple. Don't bring up the old days." I asked what he meant by the old days. He laughed, a little too fast. The army stuff. Nobody wants a war lecture over the shrimp. I did not answer him for a moment. I have never once given a war lecture. Not in 50 years. Preston has never asked me a single question about it. Not one. He does not know where I served. He does not know what I did there. He assumes there is nothing worth knowing. That is the thing about my son. He decided who I was a long time ago. A simple old man. A little embarrassing. Something to manage. He never once looked closer. I should have seen this night coming. The signs were there for years. I just chose to look away. At Preston's own wedding, 20 years ago, he introduced me to his new in-laws. As my dad, he used to work with his hands. That was all. Used to work with his hands. Like I was a tool he'd retired. When Ruth got sick, Preston sent money instead of coming. Money was easier than a chair by her bed. At her funeral, he checked his phone during the eulogy. I saw it. I said nothing. I told myself he was grieving in his own way. But a man shows you who he thinks you are in 100 small moments, long before the big one. I collected those moments, and I forgave every single one. I am good at forgiving. It might be my only real flaw. I want you to understand something. I do not talk about the war. Not because it hurts, though it does. I don't talk about it because the men who deserve the talking never came home to hear it. So I keep it quiet. I keep them quiet, inside me, where they're safe. My late wife Ruth knew. She was the only one. She'd catch me on certain nights, sitting on the porch, and she'd just bring me coffee and sit. She never made me say a word. She passed 4 years ago. Since then, it's just me and the tomatoes and the men I carry. Let me tell you what it was like to come home. Because the metal did not make life easy. I came back to Beckley in 1970. I was 20. I had nightmares I couldn't explain. I had a piece of paper that said I was a hero. and I had no idea how to be a person. There were no jobs. There was no thank you. People just wanted to forget that war, and they wanted to forget the boys who fought it. So I put the medal in a drawer. And I went to work. I worked the rail yard for 31 years. Cold hands, long shifts, honest pay. I never told a soul at that yard what was in my drawer. I was just Grady, the quiet one, good with a wrench. I met Ruth at a church supper in 1972. She had a laugh like a screen door on a spring morning. She saw the nightmares and she stayed anyway. We had Preston in 1975. I held that baby in my scarred hands and I promised him the world would be gentle with him. I made sure of it. I worked doubles so his world would be soft. I never told him mine had been hard. Maybe that was the mistake. Maybe a boy needs to know the ground he's standing on was carried there by somebody. I have one real friend left. His name is Kurt. He's 81. He served too, a different war, and he understands the quiet. We eat breakfast at the Smokehouse Diner every Tuesday. Same booth, same order. He gets the eggs too runny and complains about them every single week, and orders them the same way the next week. I told Kurt about the general's phone call that morning over coffee. Kurt set down his fork. He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "Grady, you've been letting that boy think you're nobody for 40 years. Maybe it's time you let the room find out." I told him I didn't want a scene. Kurt snorted. "You carried 11 men out of a valley. You can survive a nice dinner." That's Kurt. He's right more often than I'd like. The morning of the gala, after that phone call, I sat at my kitchen table for an hour. General Hollis. I said the name out loud, once, to the empty room. My hands were not steady. I hadn't heard that name in decades. But I knew exactly who he was, and I knew exactly why he'd come looking for a plain old man in Beckley, West Virginia. Let me back up. Because you need to know what Preston did that night, before you understand what happened. The gala was at the Prescott Hotel downtown, the nice one. Chandeliers, waiters in white gloves, a band playing soft in the corner. I put on my only suit. It's gray. It's 15 years old. I pinned one small thing to the lapel. A little ribbon. Faded blue with white stars. Most people wouldn't know what it was. Preston certainly didn't. I almost left it off. I don't know why I put it on that night. Maybe some part of me was tired of being invisible. I fixed my cracked Timex, and I drove my dented truck to my son's beautiful party. I found Preston near the entrance. He was shaking hands, glowing under the lights. When he saw me, his smile flickered. Just for a second. He looked at my gray suit, he looked at my shoes, then he steered me by the elbow, quick, toward the back of the room. "Dad, good, listen," he lowered his voice. "I put you at table 11. It's near the kitchen. Easier for you, less walking." Table 11 was in the far corner. It was where they'd seated the caterers' families and the junior staff. I understood. I was being tucked away. Out of sight. I said, "That's fine, son," because it was. I did not come to sit at the head of anything. I came because he asked. He nodded, relieved, and was gone back into the light before I finished my sentence. I sat at table 11. A kind young waitress brought me water. The people at my table were nice enough. Tired, working folks. My kind of folks. Honestly, I was comfortable there. I'd have been happy to stay in that corner all night. But then I heard my own name, from across the room. And I heard how my son said it. He was standing with a cluster of investors. Men in dark suits, women in bright dresses. One of them, an older gentleman, gestured toward me. I couldn't hear the question. But I heard Preston's answer. He didn't lower his voice enough. He never thinks the old man is listening. "Oh, that's just my father." A small laugh. He's a bit of a burden, honestly, getting up there. We keep him comfortable. A few of them chuckled, politely, and they moved on. To more interesting things. A burden? Something in my chest went very still, not angry, just still. It's a specific kind of quiet. The heavy kind. I have felt it before, a long time ago, in a place with a different kind of silence. I looked down at my hands on the white tablecloth. Old hands. Spotted, scarred across 2 knuckles. My son looked at these hands and saw a burden. He never once wondered what they had carried. Here is the part that stung, and I'll be honest about it, because I think some of you know this feeling. It wasn't the corner table, it wasn't even the word. It was that he said it so easily, like it was just a fact everyone agreed on. My whole life, to my son, was a small inconvenience to be managed politely. And I had let him believe it. Because I never told him otherwise, because I keep my men quiet, inside me, where they're safe. If you've made it this far, do me one quick favor. Subscribe. A lot of people watch without ever doing it, but it costs you nothing and means everything to us. Thank you, genuinely. Now let me tell you what happened when General Hollis walked in. I need to tell you about a night in 1969 first. It's the only time I'll take you there, so stay with me. I was 19 years old. A sergeant, barely. We were pinned down in a valley I won't name. It was dark. It was loud, and then it was terribly, terribly quiet. My lieutenant was hit. Half my squad was hit. And there was a young private, 18, from Ohio, named Danny Hollis. Danny had a leg wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. The others said the position was lost. They said to fall back. I remember looking at Danny's face. He was so young, younger than my own son would ever be. I made a choice. I didn't fall back. I went out 3 times that night, under fire, into the dark, and I carried them back. One at a time. Danny last, over my shoulder, while the world came apart around us. I got 11 men out of that valley. 9 of them lived. I don't tell you this to sound brave. I tell you so you understand what my son called a burden. They gave me a medal for that night. The highest one there is, a blue ribbon with white stars. I keep it in a drawer, wrapped in a handkerchief. I have never worn it in public, not once in 50 years. Because a medal is a heavy thing to wear when you know exactly what it cost. Danny Hollis lived. That 18-year-old private from Ohio. He stayed in the Army. He made a career of it. He rose and never stopped rising. Private Danny Hollis became General Daniel Hollis. 4 stars, and every single year, on the anniversary of that night, he sends me a card. Just a card. Same words every time. Still here because of you, Sergeant, Danny. I keep every one of them in a box. What I did not know, sitting at table 11, was that General Hollis was the surprise keynote speaker at my son's charity gala. The event supported veterans' housing. Preston had booked a distinguished military guest to give it prestige. He had bragged about it in his emails. A real 4-star general. Preston had no idea. He had no earthly idea that the general had accepted the invitation for one reason. He'd seen the guest list. He'd seen a name on it. Boone, and he'd made a quiet phone call to an aide that morning. The lights dimmed. A man walked to the podium to introduce the keynote. Preston stood near the front, beaming, straightening his tie. This was his moment. His big catch, the general who would make his company look important. And then General Daniel Hollis walked out onto that stage in his dress uniform. 4 stars on each shoulder, rows of ribbons on his chest, and the whole room rose to its feet in applause. He was older now, of course, gray at the temples. But I'd have known that face anywhere. I last saw it covered in mud and blood, over my shoulder, 50 years ago. My throat closed. I stayed in my chair in the corner. I did not want to make a scene. I just wanted to see him, once more, standing up and breathing. He stepped to the microphone, the applause faded, and he did not begin his speech. He stood there, scanning the room. Slow, careful, looking for something. Or someone. The silence stretched. People shifted, unsure. Preston's smile started to look nervous. This was not in the program. And then the general's eyes stopped. On table 11. On a plain old man in a gray suit in the corner by the kitchen. On me. He set down his notes. He stepped away from the podium and into a microphone that carried to every corner of that silent ballroom. General Daniel Hollis said, "Before I say anything else tonight, I need to address the most important person in this room. And he is not seated where he should be." Every head in that ballroom turned, trying to see who he meant. I felt the blood leave my face. The general walked down off the stage, not toward the head table, not toward the mayor or the investors or my son standing frozen at the front. He walked the length of that entire room, past all of them, straight to the corner, straight to table 11, straight to me. He stopped in front of my chair. This 4-star general, with 50 years and 4 stars between us, looked down at a broken old man he'd last seen at 19. And his eyes were wet. "Sergeant Boone," he said, and his voice cracked on my name. "Would you stand up, please, so these people can see you?" My knees didn't want to. "But you don't refuse that voice." I stood, slow in my 15-year-old gray suit. And General Daniel Hollis stepped back one pace, came to full attention, and raised his hand in a salute. A 4-star general, saluting a man at the kitchen table. And he held it. He did not drop it. He held that salute until I understood he was not going to lower his hand until I let him. I raised mine. Old habit. 50 years gone, and my arm still knew the angle. We stood there, the two of us, saluting each other across half a century, while 300 people watched and did not breathe. And I will tell you what I saw, holding that salute. I did not see the ballroom. I did not see the chandeliers, or the investors, or my son's white face. I saw the valley. I saw 9 young faces I carried out of the dark. I saw the 2 I couldn't. I have carried all 11 of them every single day for 50 years. And for one moment in a hotel ballroom in West Virginia, in front of people who'd called me a burden. Those boys were in the room with me, standing at attention, finally seen, not by me, by everyone. I felt Ruth there, too. I felt her hand on my shoulder, the way she used to on the porch on the bad nights. I heard her say, plain as morning, "There you are, Grady. There you finally are." I had to blink hard to keep standing. An old soldier does not cry in a salute. But it was close. It was very close. You spend a life being invisible on purpose. You tell yourself it doesn't matter, that you don't need the thanks, that the quiet is enough. And most days it is. But I would be lying if I told you it didn't mean something, standing there, to finally be looked at. Not pitied, not managed, not tucked by the kitchen. Looked at. Every person deserves that once. Even the quiet ones. Especially the quiet ones. Then the general turned to the room. He did not let go of the moment. He said, "I want to tell you who this man is. Because someone in this room called him a burden tonight. I heard about it. And I will not let that stand. I did not look at Preston. I couldn't. But I heard, somewhere near the front, a glass being set down very carefully on a table. In 1969, the general said, in a valley I still see when I close my eyes, this man carried 11 soldiers out of an ambush. On his back. One at a time. Under fire. 3 separate trips into the dark. He was 19 years old. His voice was steady now, and it filled the room. 9 of those men came home to their families. 9. Do you understand what that means? 9 sets of children exist because of what this man did before he was old enough to buy a drink. I am one of those men. I have 4 stars on my shoulder tonight because a 19-year-old sergeant refused to leave me bleeding in the mud. He turned back to me. The nation gave you the Medal of Honor for that night, Sergeant, the highest honor this country has. A murmur went through the room like wind, and in 50 years I have never once seen you wear it. Never heard you speak of it. You gave everything, and then you disappeared into a quiet life and grew your tomatoes and never asked for a thing." He smiled, and a tear went down his face, and he let it. "That is the most decorated man most of these people will ever stand in a room with, and you sat him by the kitchen." I finally let myself look at my son. Preston's face had gone the color of ash. He was staring at me like he had never seen me before in his life, and I suppose, in a way, he never had. He'd decided who I was at some point, years ago, and he'd stopped looking. Now, he was looking. And he did not know the man he found. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. The investors he'd been so desperate to impress were no longer looking at him at all. They were looking at me. Now, I want to tell you what I did next, because you might expect me to enjoy that. To let my son twist, to point a finger, and I understand why you'd want that. But that is not who I am, and I think it's not who Ruth raised our boy's father to be. Revenge is a dish best served cold. But I have found, at my age, that some dishes are better not served at all. I stepped forward. I put my hand on the general's arm. "Thank you, Danny," I said quietly, just for him. Then I looked out at the room, and I raised my voice just enough. I'd like everyone to sit down and enjoy their evening. This night is for veterans' housing. That's what matters. Not an old man at a kitchen table. And then I looked at my son, and I said, so only the closest tables could hear, "Preston, come sit with me a minute." He came. Of course he came. He sat down across from me at table 11, in his beautiful suit, in front of the corner by the kitchen, and for the first time since he was a small boy, my son had no idea what to say to me. His hands were shaking. "Dad," he whispered. "Dad, I never knew. You never told me. Why didn't you ever tell me?" And there it was, the real wound, not his. Mine. I looked at my boy, and I told him the truth I'd carried for 50 years. "Because you never asked, son, in your whole life, you never asked me one question about it. You decided I was a simple man. And I let you. That was my mistake as much as yours. But I want you to hear me now." I put my old scarred hand over his. "I am not a burden. I have never been a burden. I carried 11 men out of hell so their children could grow up. I can carry the weight of one son who forgot to look closer. But I would rather not have to." Preston put his face in his hands, at table 11, at his own gala, and he wept. Not the pretty kind, the real kind. The kind that comes when a man sees himself clearly for the first time and doesn't like what's there. I let him. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is let them feel the full weight of it. There was one more person at that gala I haven't told you about. My granddaughter. Preston's daughter, Cassie. She's 19. The same age I was in that valley. She had come to the event with her father. And all night, she'd been the only one who kept drifting back to the corner to sit with me. She didn't know about the medal. She didn't know any of it. She just liked her grandfather and thought table 11 had the best view. When the general saluted me, I found her face in the crowd. She was crying and smiling at the same time, both hands over her mouth. Later she pushed through everyone to get to me, and she threw her arms around my neck, and she said the thing I'll keep in the box with the general's cards. She said, "I always knew you were somebody, Grandpa. I just didn't know the world knew it too. Out of my whole family, the child who treated me like I mattered was the one who never knew I had a medal at all. She just paid attention. That's the whole secret, if you want it. Pay attention to the quiet ones. They are almost always carrying more than you think." I did not punish Preston. I want you to know that. I didn't cut him off. I didn't humiliate him further. He humiliated himself enough for both of us that night, and I think the lesson landed harder than any revenge could have. But some things did change. The next weekend, my son drove to Beckley. He didn't call first. He just showed up in my driveway. And he sat with me on the porch. And for the first time in his adult life, he asked me a question about the war. And he listened. He came back the weekend after that too, and the one after. He's still coming. I told Kurt about it the next Tuesday at our booth, over his 2 runny eggs. He didn't say anything for a while. Then he lifted his coffee cup an inch off the table, toward me. A little salute of his own. "Told you," he said. "You can survive a nice dinner." Then he complained that the eggs were too runny, and he ordered them the same way the next week. Some things a general's salute will never change, and I'm grateful for that. A man needs a few things that stay exactly the same. The general and I have lunch now, once a month. Danny drives out, or I drive to him. 2 old soldiers eating meatloaf and arguing about nothing. He says I saved his life. I tell him he's the one still driving 2 hours to eat lunch with a man by the kitchen. We laugh about it. It's good to laugh about the valley. It took me 50 years to be able to. Cassie comes when she can. She's studying nursing now. She says she wants to take care of people the way I took care of those men. She keeps a photo on her phone. It's the general, mid-salute, and me standing in my old gray suit, both of us with wet faces. She shows it to people. She says, "That's my grandpa. Not that used to be somebody. That's my grandpa." Present tense. You have no idea what those 2 little words do to an old man's heart. I still drive the dented truck. I still wear the cracked Timex. The tomatoes came in beautiful this year, and the medal is still in the drawer, wrapped in Ruth's handkerchief, where it belongs. I don't need to wear it. I know what it is. Now, so does my son. Here's what I've learned, and then I'll let you go. The world is full of people it has decided not to look at closely. The quiet ones, the old ones, the ones at the corner table, and nearly every one of them is carrying something you cannot see. A valley, a medal, a whole life of giving that never asked for thanks. Do not wait for a general to walk across the room and tell you who your father is. Walk over to the corner table yourself and ask. If you liked this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being part of this family.